Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano. It's the 16th of December, 2023. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So yes, it is a Saturday episode today, a very special episode, because I missed yesterday. That was 2 rug fuels in a week. I felt really bad about that, and I was like, no way am I going to let these guys go without go with 2 rug fuels in a week. So I'm making up for it by doing a Saturday episode, and a lot has happened over the last 2 days. So let's just get into it. So the biggest thing I think over the last 2 days that happened was the whole it wasn't a hack or exploit of Ledger, but it was a very scary thing where basically what it's called is a supply chain attack. Ended up happening on a kind of like a toolkit that Ledger kind of provides for dApp developers to use on their front ends. This account here, Norkna, I think that's how you say their name, put together a really great summary of exactly what happened. So you can see here that some front ends use an NPM package called Ledger Connector, and that's the package that I was just talking about. That package had been compromised in a supply chain attack. Doesn't matter if you use a Ledger or not. If you connect and broadcast a transaction on a compromised website like revoke.cash, you will be drained whether you use MetaMask or Rabi or etc. So yeah, this wasn't Ledger exclusive. This wasn't a problem with Ledger wallet itself or anything like that. It was just this Ledger Connector piece of software that dApp front ends in the ecosystem use. So it doesn't matter what wallet you were using, unless you kind of like had those warnings that pop up, like in Rabi, it'll warn you about certain things. But if you approve the transaction, doesn't matter if it's on a Ledger, on a MetaMask, on Rabi, Rainbow, whatever wallet you were using, it would be the same result if you were interacting with the compromised Ledger Connector here. And if you use a website that isn't compromised, you were safe. Now, this lasted, I think the changes to this package were made, the malicious changes were made about 3 to 4 hours before they were actually noticed. And it was made, I think, using a compromised account of a former Ledger employee. So obviously Ledger's security practices here is pretty bad just generally, because a former employee still had access from what I could tell. And generally this shouldn't happen at all, obviously. Like, this shouldn't be able to happen. And this is obviously one of the scarier attacks, because a supply chain attack is something that happens where like for example with the NPM package, if someone changes the code there and injects something there, it just automatically gets downstream pushed to all of the, I guess, applications or all of the things that rely on it. And that's what happened here basically. So all in all, Zach XBT tweeted out the addresses that there was around $610,000 drained from this attack. Not as much as could have been drained. I think that the crypto community really rallied around making sure that everyone was aware of this immediately. Like, as soon as it was picked up on, everyone was made very aware of this, and I guess like that definitely saved a lot of people a lot of money and saved them from getting drained. Obviously, a lot of some people still got drained, but the thing is that it was very easy to get drained by this if you weren't really, you didn't even have to not be paying attention. It was just something that, unfortunately, like, you wouldn't even know it was happening, because you can see here what this actually looked like. So the malicious connect wallet pop-up would open on top of the actual wallet pop-up. So essentially what would happen is that, when you go to connect your wallet on one of these websites, it would ask you which wallet you want to connect with. There is in the background the real one, the one that's not malicious, and then the foreground is the malicious one. So if you were a user who thought, oh, maybe this is just like a glitch or something, or just a bug, and you connected using this modal that's on top, using whatever wallet it is, you would have no indication that something was wrong, unless, something like Rabi told you and warned you of this. But really, if you were using most wallets, you would have no idea that something was wrong at all, because it would just feel like a normal flow to you. But in reality, you would connect and do a transaction, and that would just drain your funds. So obviously this is a really scary kind of thing here, and this is something that should never happen. And it really is Ledger's fault here for allowing this to happen in the first place. Like, they should have much better security practices around their packages and around who can update the software. And also, as an ecosystem, we really need to build like alerting systems around this. The fact that it took like 3 to 4 hours for this to come along is not great. We should be able to alert around this pretty much instantly, and I don't think there's been enough eyes put on the supply chain attack kind of vector here, because this is a big attack vector, all over the place, not just within crypto. When I used to work in cybersecurity, it was definitely one of the things that people worried the most about was these supply chain attacks, because so many pieces of software rely on these packages, right, on these upstream packages that can be injected with malicious code, and then that can be loaded in without you even knowing, and that could lead to, not just loss of funds, loss of private data, database leaks, stuff like that. So definitely something that is pretty dangerous. And as I said, like, it's on Ledger here for allowing this to happen. And it's kind of sad, because Ledger has done this multiple times now in terms of having poor security practices, right? Like they had the whole thing where they leaked everyone's real address tied to their real name in their database leak. They had the whole thing about the Ledger Recover fiasco, which basically was, I mean, that was a complete shit show, right? We all know that. And there was one other thing I think as well, including this latest thing. And it's sad because like I actually think that they make decent hardware wallets. Like I honestly enjoy using them. Like I've used them in the past. I use other hardware wallets as well, like Lattice One, things like that. I enjoy using them, right? They're fine to use. Yes, they could be better. Obviously, it'd be nice to have on the screen, like it has on the Lattice One, a complete breakdown of what you're signing, what the transaction is, things like that. But generally, I don't think it's a bad product. But their constant kind of fumbling of the ball here in terms of security practices just cast a lot of doubt on their actual hardware wallets. Like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with their hardware wallets at all, right? I'm not saying that, and I don't want to imply that, obviously. But at the same time, people will get kind of doubtful. They're just like, if this is their security practices here, then what's it like for their hardware wallets? Could a malicious Ledger update be pushed, like firmware update be pushed by some malicious actor because the Ledger wasn't paying attention, right? So these are real concerns. So when looking at these sorts of things as a whole, we shouldn't expect the end users to be able to actually look at these things and kind of check everything themselves. It's on us as an ecosystem and on the developers to make sure that this stuff never happens. And obviously some things will slip through the cracks, but at the same time, like we need to put in place a lot of different protections, a lot of different kind of risk measures, mitigations to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Because this was, a very scary attack. This could have led to a lot more funds lost if it wasn't, if the alarm wasn't sounded as quickly as it was. So it was great to see that the alarm was sounded there. Now, of course, the issue was fixed pretty quickly by Ledger once they discovered it. But I don't think you need to do this by now. But if you wanted to kind of like use your websites again or use the dApps again, usually what happens is you'd have to refresh your cache here. So you would basically just like hard refresh the website or clear the site data, which is outlined here by Mudit. But yeah, I don't think it should be an issue now. But unfortunately it was. And I hope this doesn't happen again because it's a scary thing. Like I myself might have not even picked up on this, right? Like that double modal thing that I see here, like I don't even know if I would have thought that was weird. I maybe thought it was weird, but I would have looked at that and been like, okay, maybe it's just a glitch, right? Because looking at this picture in front of me, it doesn't have any obvious signs that it is malicious, right, at all. It just looks like a normal pop-up. Yes, it's popping up on top of another one, but then looking at that, even as an experienced user, you may just assume that it is a bug in the website. It's a front-end bug, and you're like, okay, whatever, who cares? It's a front-end bug. I'm used to this in crypto. Crypto UX isn't the best, right? So like, it's kind of scary that like even myself, I don't know if I would have picked up on this, and there was no other indication as well. So I think that in the future, maybe you need to just be more, I guess, aware of these things and more alert of these things, but also it's on the developers to make sure this doesn't happen and that it is impossible to happen. Obviously, you can't make it impossible to happen. Like that's impossible, right? But making it as hard as possible for this to happen, because the way it happened with Ledger, from what I saw, it happened way too easily and it was way too easy to do, and it shouldn't have happened that way to begin with. But yeah, anyway, that was the Ledger thing in a nutshell. As I said, the Ledger devices are fine. Your wallets weren't compromised. It wasn't an approval hack or anything like that, or approval exploit or anything like that. It was just a new form of not a new exploit, but it was like a new kind of thing that we hadn't really seen before in crypto. And now I think everyone's aware of it, so we should see better security practices going forward here. All right, moving on. So Christine Kim has another update about the latest all-core devs calls and just kind of latest update on Dencun generally. So DevNet 12 now hosts all of the execution layer and consensus layer client combinations, including Prism. Devs say they're on track to launch a Girly shadow fork before the end of the year. So this is the shadow fork, not the testnet. So it's a shadow fork of Girly. Then obviously the testnet fork will happen in January here. There's also some other updates that you can read in the blog post, but I think that was that was the main one. I think I mentioned that last week's All Core Devs call was the last one. Next week's will be the last All Core Devs call. So I read it wrong last time when I said that. So yeah, next week's will be the last call. They've obviously cancelled the call that was going to be on December 25th because that's Christmas, and they may cancel other calls or substitute things, obviously because of the holiday period here. But generally, they'll be back, stronger than ever in the new year. as we march towards getting Denkun live on the Ethereum network, which from what I've seen still remains April remains the date here, guys. Like I haven't seen anything that would indicate that would be pushed back further, but you guys know I'll keep you all updated on that. But you can go check out Christine Kim's post. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so Miga Labs have tweeted out a little tweet thread here yesterday where they said, "We are happy to announce the deployment of a new version of the MonitorETH.io dashboard packed with new powerful insights, providing a comprehensive display of ISP distribution and staking entities distribution." So, I mean, I've showed you guys this before, this website that Miga Labs have created. I've showed it on the refill, but they have updated it, and they've got a lot of different metrics here. So obviously they've got the client diversity, client type distribution. This is for the consensus layer side of things. They've got node hosting distribution. So is it unhosted? Is it residential? Is it cloud? Keep scrolling down. You've got like beacon nodes per ISP, beacon nodes per cloud ISP, which is metrics that I haven't actually seen displayed before, which is pretty cool to see. And then you can just keep scrolling down. There are so many metrics here, guys. Like I'll link this in the YouTube description. You can go check it out for yourself, but it's really, really great to see that that this is being tracked, and we're able to kind of like check, all these kind of different information from different entities here, and you can actually see they've got like a heat map here of active validator entities across the entire spectrum. Now there is a rather large others section here which haven't been attributed to any entity before. So you can see here that others accounts for around 37%. I would say that maybe 5, 6, 7% of that would be solo stakers. The other 30%, not sure where it would fall into. I think it would fall into things like Coinbase because it seems that their percentages here are quite low. It says here Coinbase is only 8%, but Coinbase is almost double that according to Rated.network. So yeah, I guess you could take like 8% out of the others section, give it to Coinbase, but the rest of it seems to be pretty on par with what Rated.network has here. And then they've got Lido obviously on the side here with 32%, but then they've obviously broken up Lido into each individual node operator that you can go check out there as well. But yeah, just a bunch of really cool metrics around the consensus layer that you can go check out for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description. And you can also check out Miga Labs' thread, which highlights the updated changes there. All right, so EIP 7251, that is going to be one of the main EIPs that is hopefully going to be included in the Petra upgrade, which is the upgrade that's happening after the Denkun upgrade. Now, what this EIP is basically is the one that I've spoken about quite a bit on the refuel before, but it's the EIP to increase the max effective balance of validators from 32 ETH to 2048 ETH. Now, what this would do, it would basically allow you to have one validator with up to 2048 ETH on it that would all be earning rewards, or all be earning staking rewards. So let's say you have 10 validators today, that's 320 ETH, and then you have 32 ETH per validator. You could consolidate that into one validator with 320 ETH on it. Now, there's a few reasons why this is cool. One is because consolidation of validators means less node on the Ethereum network. It does not mean less security because it's still the same amount of ETH staked, and we don't actually need lots of validators anymore because we pivoted away from the original sharding design. So having too many validators as we have right now is actually technical debt. So changing that is going to be really healthy for the network overall, and it will actually have downstream effects such as allowing us to increase the blob sizes because the network overhead goes down from the amount of validators on the network. We can increase the blob sizes, which increases scalability for L2. So there's some nice kind of benefits here. But the other benefit, especially for solo stakers, is that they're going to be able to compound their stake much more efficiently now. So instead of having to wait till you have another 32 ETH to spin up another validator or another solo validator, now you can just add it to your existing one as you go. You can actually, there's actually a second point here about one of the main features of this EIP is that you could allow, that they're thinking of allowing validators to specify a custom ceiling in their withdrawal credential for the sweep to kick in. So essentially, you would say, okay, well, I want my validators balance to be swept at this amount, right? And then that would sweep it and essentially kind of restake it in your validator for you there. And there's a few other kind of things that go in here as well, such as execution layer, triggered exits, and partial withdrawals, which is an extension of EIP 7002, which would basically allow the withdrawal credential to specify either a full exit or a partial withdrawal as long as the effective balance stays above 32 ETH. And there's some changes to slashing here as well. But yeah, I mean, and I'll link this document in the YouTube description. You can go check it out. But this was posted by Mike Nuda. who about 3 days ago, who was the champion for this EIP, to be honest. But I am very much in favor of this. I think it's going to be a huge boon to the network generally. I think that the concerns around increased risks of slashing are mostly unfounded, but also addressable, and that's what they're doing with this EIP here. So yeah, this I think will be like the flagship EIP of Petra, to be honest, in terms of the one that gets the most amount of people excited because of all those downstream effects and all those positive externalities that come from it. And that's the one I'm definitely most excited about, because right now, I mean, if I want to spin up another solo validator, I have to wait for 32 ETH. Yes, I could do it with Rocket Pool, for example, and spin it up again. But with Rocket Pool, at least right now, I would have to buy more RPL in order to spin up more mini pools, which is a bit frustrating. And yes, there are other solutions out there too, but I'm talking about being a pure solo staker, which you guys know, that's my whole thing, right? I love being a pure solo staker. But for me to do that, if I buy ETH, say I buy like a couple of ETH, and then I'm like, okay, well, I can't stake this right now because I don't have another 20, I don't have another 30 ETH to create another validator. I have to wait until I get to that. And obviously the price keeps going up over time, and it becomes harder and harder for me to get to 32 ETH, or get another 32 ETH. It doesn't happen very often, let me tell you that. But in this world, where with this EIP, live on the network, I could just add it to an existing validator that I have, and it would all be good. And I'd be able to begin earning rewards on that immediately. So it wouldn't just be ETH sitting in my wallet. I'd be using that ETH and obviously contributing to this overall security of the Ethereum network as well. So I'm just super excited about this EIP. You know what? I'm actually not just excited about the solo staker efficiency for restaking, or I guess like for compounding their stake here, but I'm also excited about the fact that the network load will go down, and that will make it more accessible for people because it means bandwidth requirements go down to be a validator, to be a full node, and also it will allow for us to do more cool things on the network, such as increasing the size of blobs and just scaling out the layer 1, because there's a common misconception that layer 1 scaling is not happening at all, but it actually is. Like it's happening for layer 2s, but it also is happening for layer 1 generally too. It's happening in different ways. It's not going to happen in the way that it happens at layer 2, where we have like massive scalability increases and boosts, but it is happening, and that scalability is really happening with the goal of essentially making the layer 2s more scalable, but also having a byproduct effect of making the layer 1 more scalable, secure, and reliable generally as well. All right, moving on. So Arbitrum's sequencer went down again overnight. So obviously this has happened, I think, once before as well, but this time it happened not because their, sequencer, or I guess like the way they pay gas fees to Ethereum, ran out of ETH. That's what happened last time. This happened because people were spamming inscription transactions on Arbitrum, and these are transactions that submit some hex data on chain, such as images and metadata mostly, and this obviously caused the sequencer to fall over. I do want to state before I jump into this, because I think this is a pretty interesting discussion, but I do want to state that I think that if there were multiple sequencers, this wouldn't have happened, because there is only one sequencer right now, and that means that the liveness guarantees aren't as good as they can be because there's only one, right? If there were multiple sequencers, that means that if Off-Chain Labs' sequencer went offline, some other sequencer could have picked up the slack, right? So that's what basically happened here. But even though the sequencer kind of went offline here, it wasn't offline for very long, but it was offline just generally. So I think it's worth pointing that out. And it was overwhelmed by these kind of inscription-related transactions, which has actually been going from blockchain to blockchain. If you actually look, I think that Polygon POS chain was spammed with it. Avalanche was their C chain was spammed with it as well, and that actually caused fees to go up a lot on Avalanche, funny enough. And I think it caused fees to go up on Arbitrum as well during this, where fees actually, I think, went up really, really high because people were just trying to get their transactions in here, and because the sequencer was struggling to get transactions through. Obviously, it works the same way as Ethereum L1, where you pay more in priority fees to get your transaction included here. So yeah, that's essentially what happened. And obviously, inscription started on Bitcoin, but you can do this on basically any EVM chain, from what I see. And it kind of begs the question of, okay, well, if this is happening on these L2s and all this spam is happening, like how do we kind of like not stop this, but how do we prevent, I guess, like this kind of stuff from just clogging these things up? Because I think that inscriptions are fine, but if people are just spamming the kind of chain and spamming the chain with like useless stuff, like from a sustainability perspective, and from running like a full node and from running a validator on these things, like, yes, those transactions should be able to go through because the system is allowing it, but you need to think of like sustainability here. You need to think of like the fact that it'll become harder to sync a full node if it's just like all this spam on the chain. And this is what Ethereum L1 has been dealing with for quite a while, and this is part of the stateless roadmap, where essentially it wouldn't require everyone to hold all of this state. because essentially most of it is garbage state, right? Most of it is just spam, and really, in reality, like no one really cares about that spam. It's not, and being stateless, where someone isn't storing your spam like you want them to, is not something that needs to be guaranteed, right? And there's different debates on different sides of the aisle here, but that's kind of what it comes back to there. But yeah, you can read Saiga's tweet thread here for just more of an explanation around this. But that was the TLDR. It basically fell over because it was getting spammed. It basically got DOSed, essentially, right? And the fees went up, and then the sequencer came back online, as you can see here. Yeah, so basically the sequencer came back online. The spam started again, to be honest, right? With the inscription spam. And the funny thing is that Arbitrum became the number one payer of ETH fees today on the Ethereum L1 network. I think they were paying around 25% of all Ethereum fees on the network today, which is an insane amount for Arbitrum here. And I think that they were doing around 300 TPS, 300 transactions per second at one point, which is crazy. I mean, we're actually seeing the L2s stress tested now. We're actually seeing them get a lot of usage. But as I said, as usage goes up on any chain, fees tend to go up because there's priority fees that kick in, and there is still a risk of the chain going offline because it gets DOSed, right? Doesn't matter, I mean, how much you do, there is still a chance of a DOS vector here, especially if you only have one sequencer. Like, as I said, if you had like 10 sequencers, all processing transactions, the chance of all 10 of them going down is zero, really. I mean, not all 10 of them would get DOSed the same way. They'd be running on different hardware, right? They'd be run by different people. So the chance of all of them going down at the same time is pretty much zero. And the thing is with an L2 and with a rollup is that it's a 1 of n trust assumption, where basically you only need one sequencer. So even if 9 of them went down and only one was still live, your transaction would still go through and everything would still be fine, right? And even on top of that, as was mentioned here by Average Joe's Crypto, because Arbitrum is a layer 2, doesn't matter if the whole thing goes down, you can still get your transactions in on layer 1. So you could still actually exit back to Ethereum L1 from the L1. So you could submit transactions to L1 like you would submit them on Arbitrum L2. Yes, they would cost you more, but you could still get your funds back from that. So that's a very important point about L2s and rollups that people just don't talk about enough, in my opinion. That's the whole selling point, right? But to go back to what I was saying about sequencers, so this is the difference between this is the key difference between a layer 1 and a layer 2, especially a layer 1 that has a liveness threshold of basically 33%. So essentially what happens is that if most of the network it can't come to consensus, or no, not most of it. If 33%, from my understanding of the network, can't come to consensus and basically gets DOSed, the chain halts because of that, right? Whereas with the L2s here, if you have like 10 sequences instead of just one, and 9 of them go offline, which again is, I mean, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's an extremely low chance that that's going to happen, you still have that one, and that one doesn't need to come to consensus on anything, right? That one can post the batch to Ethereum L1 just fine, and that's exactly how L2s work. So this is a temporary issue. Once the sequences start getting decentralized and anyone can run sequences, we get better liveness guarantees, obviously better censorship resistant guarantees, and logically, the L2s should never go down, really. Again, because as I said, like DOSing becomes really a non-issue because you have multiple parties running sequences. Now, of course, if your L2 isn't very popular and you've only got one person running a sequencer or one sequencer, then the point is moot. But I think that with services like EigenDA going live, which will encourage people to run sequences for these chains and basically get rewarded for it in various different ways, and then there's shared sequences as well, I don't think this is going to be an issue, even for the smaller L2s. I really don't. I really think that we're going to have like a very robust and strong sequencer network for all of these chains, and this will be a non-issue at some point in the future. But as I said, good to see the L2s getting stress tested here. Good to see that Arbitrum, once they came back up, is able to process this, and I don't think they've gone offline again from what I've seen. Fees, I don't know if fees actually went up again because I wasn't using it at the time. I'm just going to l2fees.info here to see what the fees look like. Yeah, I mean, the fees are pretty normal still on Arbitrum 1 there, but I don't know if the spam's kind of going on right now. But yeah, it was processing 300 TPS. And I think if you actually add Arbitrum to the other L2s and to Ethereum L1 TPS, I think altogether, Ethereum was doing 500 to 600 TPS, which is on par with what Solana does, right? And I know TPS is not a great metric. I mean, I've said this plenty of times, and I don't think any metric is actually great. But it's kind of funny how, this narrative will be pushed that, Ethereum can't do this, but it can. Ethereum can. It's just doing it in a different way. Ethereum does it at L2, right? So, Solana, for example, it does it at L1. It's just different ways of scaling. And I don't think it should be a thing where we kind of say that this way is wrong or this way is right. But I've always talked about what's the most sustainable way, and that's my bull case for Ethereum's kind of modular roadmap. Is that I think it's much more sustainable from a technological perspective and from an economical perspective. And I think that L2s can just scale a lot more as well, generally. And we're going to see that play out as demand comes online, as L2s continue to get more usage, as they continue to scale out with other upgrades that they do to their own networks, and obviously things like 4844 going live. We're just going to see a really, really, I think, like beautiful scaling ecosystem flourish, and the narrative will shift back, guys. Like I was talking about this in the Daily Gwei Discord channel before. You can actually go check out those conversations for yourself. It's actually pretty interesting because I love having these conversations because I tend to think of things that I hadn't thought of before. But really, if you kind of look at the ecosystem as it exists today and what people pay attention to, I mean, I talk about this all the time, right? Narratives versus reality. But then you have to kind of go to the core of the narrative and see, okay, what's actually pushing this narrative forward? What is actually forming this narrative? And it's always price, right? It's always where people are making money. So right now, people are making money on speculating on random things. Like you go to CoinGecko, you see all these random things pumping, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, is my thesis wrong? Am I wrong about the fundamentals? Should I sell all my ETH for this thing or that thing? Look, that's up to you. I'm not going to give you investment advice on this. But what I want to make clear to you is that the price going up of some random asset doesn't mean the fundamentals improved at all, right? It doesn't really mean anything. Because if you look at a lot of this stuff, they're basically the same as they were when the price was lower. It's just that there was a narrative formed and the price goes up, and then obviously people make money and then they get more excited about things, and then the narrative becomes a self-perpetuating thing. So Ethereum had this in 2020 and 2021, DeFi summer, into ETH going up a lot, into tokens going up, into NFTs, right, going up. And now over the last, I guess, like, it has really only been like 2 to 3 months, guys. I mean, I think that crypto warps our perception of time. But in the last 2 to 3 months, you look at something like the Solana ecosystem and you say, okay, well, Sol went up, and then these other tokens got airdropped, and this Bonk token went up, and people were making money there, and that's good, and that's fine. I'm really happy for the people making money. But the mistake people make is that they fall into the trap that the market forces them into, which is the narrative trap of, they start thinking that all these weird narratives, and they start believing in all these weird narratives, and they start thinking that these things are more than what they are, and they start saying things like, oh, Ethereum's dead, Ethereum L2s are dead, the Ethereum thesis is wrong, when in reality, if Ethereum L2s were doing all the airdrops and people were making money on there, which they will at some point, right? It's inevitably going to happen, then the narrative would shift back, and you'd see immediately people being like, oh, I love this L2, or I love that L2. And it's because narrative tends to follow the price, right, of things. It's just the way the crypto ecosystem works. And that's definitely going to happen. I think I think next year is poised for the narrative to shift back to Ethereum and L2s for sure. I mean, we have multiple big projects doing their airdrops. We have exciting things happening with EIP 4844 going live. Obviously, people are going to speculate on the ETH ETF. And obviously, like these apps maybe doing airdrops of their tokens, stuff like that. And really, narratives go stale over time as well. Like things get boring. It may not feel like it in the moment, but things do get boring over time. And as I said, this has only been going on for around 2 to 3 months in the Solana ecosystem, and that's what happened actually in DeFi summer in 2020. It went on for literally 3 months. It felt like years if you were there. I was there. I was on the front line, so to speak. It felt like years, right? But it was 3 months, really. And then a lot of the most popular DeFi tokens at the time, they went down like 70% in a couple of weeks. And these things went up a lot, of course, but then they just absolutely destroyed everyone. And I remember that the poster child for this was YFI, or the Yearn token. Mate, if you guys were around back then, you'll know what I mean. But if you weren't, let me just describe to you what this token was. It was basically the equivalent of Bonk in terms of people thinking that this thing was going up only forever, right? Literally forever. Everyone was hyper bullish on it. They thought that it was going to cure world hunger, cure cancer. They thought it was going to be the best thing ever. And it went to 100K. It started off at 0 basically, and it went to 100K. What did people say it was going to go to when it was 100K? They said it was going to go to 1 million, right? Guess what happened? Coinbase listed it. That was the Pico top. It never went back to that price against ETH. It only briefly went back a bit higher, I think, against USD around the top of everything of like May 2021. But it went down against ETH to date 97% from there. It is still down against ETH, 97%. And this is an asset that was the most bullish thing in the world, or in the crypto world at that time. Like I quite literally, I remember this very vividly because I was pretty bullish on this asset back then, honestly. I mean, I kind of fell into this trap because I was rather noobish still back then. But It's the same thing I'm seeing now. And it doesn't matter what ecosystem it is, guys. It doesn't matter if it's Ethereum, it doesn't matter if it's Solana, it doesn't matter if it's Avalanche or whatever other ecosystem it is. Market dynamics are always the same. Market forces are always the same. Narratives always play out the same way. And it doesn't matter what the tech's like, it doesn't matter what the fundamentals are like. If it's a narrative, it's a narrative. If it's reality, it's reality. And I know I talk about this all the time, but I thought it was just good to sit back and kind of like just talk about this stuff, especially on a weekend episode. Maybe you guys are kind of like sitting around speculating on things and thinking about these things as well, because I know a lot of you talk about it in the Daily Gwei Discord channel. So I just wanted to outline it the way I think about it and the way I think about these things, and the way, and also highlight to you guys that like the crypto markets and crypto generally will completely warp your perception of time, because it may feel like it's been years of this stuff going on, but really the bulk of this stuff going on, and by this stuff I mean like just random shit going up in value and you FOMOing, thinking you missed out on it, whatever. The bulk of it has happened in the last month. And if you look at one of the poster childs of this, which is the Bonk kind of meme coin, it did the majority of its move in 2 months, right, basically. And the thing is, it just got listed on Coinbase, right? So what's going to be funny for me, and the funniest thing for me is going to be in a few months, or maybe it doesn't even take a few months, maybe it only takes a few weeks, I revisit it and look at, okay, did it do the exact same thing YFI did? Because I saw so many parallels between it. I saw, like, yes, YFI was tied to an actual project. As far as I know, Bonk isn't actually tied to a project. It's like a meme coin, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But YFI was also a meme coin. I remember at the time, there were plenty of memes around it. There was a meme that we would all go to Tokyo and have a party with Blue Kirby, who was like, this is ancient history now, but for those of you who are around, Blue Kirby was an account on Twitter that was shilling the hell out of YFI all the time, right? And they ended up getting doxxed, and I think they ended up just like leaving crypto, basically. But essentially, YFI was actually a meme coin at the time. Even though it had a project attached to it, and the project's fine, there's nothing wrong with it, it became a meme coin just by sheer will of the narrative and sheer will of the people speculating on it. And I see so many parallels between these two things, right? And I see so many parallels with other things. So I'm not going to say that, I guess like, I'm not going to give investment advice on this sort of stuff here. I'm not going to say that these things can't go up again or can't pump again or anything like that. But when I see these things playing out, and as someone who's been around for a while, and when I see history repeating itself, I tend to think that, okay, history's repeated itself on the way up. There's no discernible reason why it can't repeat itself on the way down, especially because markets always tend to play out in cycles, tend to play out the similar way. And then when you actually step back and look at everything from a holistic perspective, you kind of come to this conclusion here. But anyway, I think that was a long-winded way of me saying that don't fall into the market's tricks. The market will always try to push you into a trade. It will always try to get you to FOMO. It will always try to push you into narratives. If I've learned anything from investing, that is like the worst thing to do, because I fell into those things as well myself, and I've lost money falling into those things, or I've held on to things way longer than I should have, and so on and so forth. And it happens in every ecosystem. This is not an ecosystem specific thing. This is a crypto specific thing. This is a market specific thing. So if you think that you found something and you think that it's a new paradigm and you've forgotten what a bear market feels like, I would caution against thinking that's a good thing to feel, right? Because at the end of the day, if you start thinking like that, I think it's near the top of what you're thinking it about. Because I remember in 2021, it was the same thing. In 2017, it was the same thing. New paradigm, things going up forever, well, blah, blah, blah. And I remember even on ETH, where ETH in 2017 in January to 2018 in January went from $10 to $1,420, right? It went up 142 times. And at that point, people were still saying that it's going up more. New paradigm. You know, we're going to go higher. What do you mean we're going to go higher? We just did 142x in a year, and you're saying we're going to go higher. And of course, what do you think happened? ETH went down 94% in less than a year, right? So just setting those expectations, knowing what's a narrative, knowing what's reality, knowing how markets work is how you save yourself here. And it's how you save yourself from feeling bad about things too, because I know people feel bad about things like, I should have bought this or I should have bought that. Well, as I also described in the Daily Gwei Discord channel today, if you actually look at how this works, what you're looking at is oh, I should have bought the bottom and then held till now and I would have made like 10x my money. That's not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is not what you should have done, what you have done, and what your P&L, your profit and loss, looks like. Because I guarantee you that you wouldn't have put it all in at the bottom on anything that you bought. Doesn't matter how bullish you were on it at the time. Guarantee you would not have put it all in at the bottom. So let's say you buy it at the bottom, but then it goes 5x and you buy more. Well, now your average entry price is up, right? And now your average profit is going to be less because your average entry price is up. Now, when you kind of look at it over the long term and look at how much money you netted out and net profit, and then you compare it to buying other things, most of the time you would have actually netted out the same, because it's not about buying the bottom and selling the top. No one does that. No one buys the Pico bottom and sells the Pico top, like ever. If they say they do, they're lying to you. That's just not something that happens, right? Or at least it's not something that happens consistently. Could happen on an off random chance. But what you have to look at is your average entry price versus your average exit price, and then look at the profit that you made from that. And then you can compare that to other assets. Did you outperform this asset? Did you outperform that asset? But even then, it's kind of pointless, because you can't prove a counterfactual. You can't basically prove that you outperformed this asset, because maybe you would have bought that other asset at a different price. Maybe you would have made more profit on that because you sold it at a different price. So really, the only thing that ultimately matters at the end of the day when it comes to investing in crypto or wherever else is how much money you make. That's all that matters. And if you want to play it on hard mode, it is the way I like to play it these days is that what matters more is, have you outperformed ETH over the long run, over that period of time that you kind of held that? Did you outperform ETH? That's hard mode to me. But generally, most people don't want to do that. They just want to make dollars, which is completely fine, right? They just want to make more fiat. But again, it comes back to what you need to look at is your average kind of purchase price and the profit that you make over that period of time, and then that is all that matters, right? Nothing else matters. Anyway, I've gone on a rant there. This is going to be a longer episode today, but it already is a longer episode. But yeah, I'm going to move on from that one. You can check out the tweets that I spoke about. I'll link them in the YouTube description below. And if you want to get involved with these discussions, I'm always active in the Daily Gwei Discord channel discussing this with people. We have a lot of great discussions in there, and I just love educating people about this stuff. All right, so Lyra's V2 rollout has begun. So you can now start trading at Lyra.finance. There is currently a competition that started, which is their BTC ETF PVP competition. You can learn more about that on this blog post, which I'll link in the YouTube description below. But I did mention this the other day. But essentially what it is that they're trying to concentrate liquidity on a single asset, which is BTC, and expire it on Jan 12th. They want to create the highest ever BTC options open interest expiry in DeFi and make V2 the most liquid venue to trade the quadruple witching and BTC spot ETF news. So there's a competition running, as I said. It started already, which coincides with this quadruple witching event, which is a term that refers to the expiries of these options around the date of the ETF. And it obviously leads to market volatility. And the competition will end on January 12th here, and you can earn PvP points and win Lyra. So yeah, I mean, the full details about this are in the description here. I'll link this in the YouTube description, in the blog post here, which I'll link in the YouTube description for you to check out. And just a friendly reminder that Lyra is live on their own chain. They're also on Optimism and Arbitrum, but I think this competition is taking part on their own Lyra chain. Actually, I'm not 100% sure if Lyra chain is live yet or not, but I do know they're live on Arbitrum and Optimism. Yeah, you can go check it out at Lyra.finance. Yeah, I'll link that in the YouTube description below. All right, so an update from EigenDA today. So EigenDA has announced support for Optimism's OP stack, which is available now against the debut EigenDA testnet. Rollups will have the option of persisting L2 transaction data to EigenDA, enjoying negligible L1 gas costs while maintaining a security budget on par with Ethereum. So great to see that OP stack is now supporting EigenDA, or EigenDA is now integrated with OP stack, which means that all of the OP stack chains can, if they want to, store their data on EigenDA's testnet right now, but then in the future, their mainnet. I believe EigenDA is targeting a Q1 launch window for their for mainnet here. So not too far away, but it's going to be interesting to see how all of these different chains handle their data availability, right? Or handle where they post their data to, because obviously, as you guys know, Ethereum L1 is the gold standard for data availability, but it also comes at a cost, right? It costs more. Whereas EigenDA, Celestia, Nia, in the future, Avail, and a few others out there, they're obviously going to be cheaper than Ethereum L1 is going to be, but they're not going to give you anywhere near the same security guarantees as Ethereum L1 is, of course. And persistence guarantees as well. Remains to be seen how each of them persist their data, and guarantees around data availability generally, right? But then I think that, as I've said before, there are a lot of use cases where this makes sense because you don't need Ethereum's security for things like gaming NFTs, right? Like I've said this before. There are a lot of use cases that don't require Ethereum security. I do believe that DeFi chains or DeFi L2s should definitely have their data on Ethereum L1. Because one, they can probably afford the cost. Well, they can definitely afford the cost because DeFi tends to produce a lot more economic activity than anything else does, right? So they can definitely afford the cost. And also, they definitely should get that security guarantee there because DeFi handles a lot of money, right? Handles a lot of economic activity. But for most other things, social apps, gaming, payments apps even, to be honest, like small payments and microtransactions, things like that, do not need the data guarantees of Ethereum L1 because I compare it to Ethereum L1 is like the US military, and you wouldn't use the US military to protect your trading card collection, right? So it's the same with when it comes to where you'll store your data here. And then really the I guess like end game of this is allowing people to store their own data, because if you're allowed to store your own data, then you can just have to trust yourself. And then you can basically use these things with the guarantee that, okay, they're posting this data to this data availability layer. And if the data becomes unavailable on this DA layer, well, then I've still got the data available to myself and I can still access my funds. And also these L2s will give you the option to store your data on Ethereum L1 if you want to, but you just pay the fee yourself instead of the L2 paying it for you. So there's multiple different ways that this can happen here. And I think that the apps themselves will decide where they want to store their data, or the L2s will decide, and the bigger users of the L2s will decide where they want to store their data. But it's going to be a bit of I guess like filling around, seeing what works over the next few years, and I'm excited to see it play out. So yeah, you can go check out the details about this. There's a thread, I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so speaking of where L2s store their data, you can see here that Coffee shared today what Rollup spent on posting data to Ethereum in November. So you can see that they spent a lot. Arbitrum 1 spent $4.4 million posting their data to Ethereum in November, Linear $3.7 million, Optimism $2.5 million, ZK Sync $2.5 million, and so on and so forth, which equals a total, if you look at the chart here, of about $20 million. So Ethereum L2s paid $20 million to secure themselves or to post their data to Ethereum in November. And I believe this number in December is going to be higher because just over the last 24 hours, Arbitrum has posted, I think, like over $2 million or spent over $2 million on posting their batches to Ethereum L1 here. Now, of course, this is going to change for two reasons over the next couple of years, especially. One is that some of these L2s are going to opt to put their data off-chain, as I was just discussing. And two, the costs are going to collapse, at least over the short term, with the introduction of 4844, aka blob-style transactions, because the L2s will now be posting their data to blobs, which should be cheaper than the normal kind of call data or fees, or the normal L1 fee market for a little while. Remains to be seen, because there is actually a risk now that inscriptions actually flood blob style transactions and we get spam there for a little bit. So it remains to be seen what happens. But yeah, those are the two things that could affect this. But still, if you assume that demand for these things are going to go up like 10,000x from here, which obviously we all kind of like assume, and we all hope that happens, because obviously we want to see this stuff keep going, then that extra demand is going to offset the I guess like the reduction in costs and basically get us back to where we are today. And we just got to keep scaling and scaling. And then obviously cumulatively, it'll be at the same point as it is today, if not more. And I mean, I have said to you guys that I believe at some point in the future, if Ethereum is successful with its L2 roadmap, which I think it will be, obviously, we could be generating, I mean, I know I said tens of billions of dollars of daily fees on Ethereum L1. That's like a far future thing, but there exists a future where hundreds of millions of dollars of daily fees on Ethereum L1 is not too far away from L2s, from L1 activity. And that's obviously really, really bullish for Ethereum activity generally. It's really bullish because we still have cheap fees on these L2s. It's just that collectively there's a lot of transactions happening. So obviously, it's cheap individual fees, but cumulatively it adds up to a lot, which gets posted down to Ethereum L1, which of course increases the L1 revenue, which of course increases the burn, which obviously should flow to ETH's value over the long term, which increases the security of Ethereum. It really is a beautiful system when you think about it, right? And that's the way I think about it. And that's why I think about economic sustainability of these systems. And that's why I always talk about economic sustainability of these systems over the longer term. And it's kind of frustrating sometimes because I think a lot of people operate on like the short term cycle, whereas I operate on like the 5, 10 plus year cycle. cycle, and there's no way I can talk to these people about these things because they just aren't operating on the same time frame, which is completely fine, but it is a little bit frustrating sometimes. But anyway, I think that's going to be it for today's extra long episode. So yeah, hope you enjoyed a Saturday episode, and so thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give that video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all on Monday. Thanks everyone.